Living green or sustainably is about more than saving on your electric bill and doing your part to protect natural resources. It is about a safer and healthier life for you and your family without sacrificing style, quality, or budget. This is a movement to provide all of us with clean air to breathe and water to drink, safe, healthy food to eat, and places to live, and energy to run the places where we live, learn, play, and work. The Green Gab podcast helps you get the value of green for you, your family, and your community. Whether it's green homes, green living, or the people who make it happen, join me, Marla Esser-Close, to learn how green and sustainability practices and products work for our world and you. Welcome to the Green Gab. I'm Marla, the Green Home Coach, and I am here today in my virtual home recording studio, which, by the way, is my normal place to be, so no big difference right now, with Marie Beyer of, you're going to introduce yourself, Jackie.
The Green Organic Garden Podcast.
And I love the new name. Jackie formerly had a different name to her podcast, but you have been podcasting, oh my gosh, 5 years?
Yeah, we just had our 5-year anniversary, January 29th. I just released episode 311 yesterday, and it has just been an awesome journey.
Congratulations. That is an accomplishment.
Thank you. Yeah, because I have done 90% of it working full time.
Which is amazing. Absolutely.
I'm just a one-girl show. And the big difference was we added green to the beginning of our title just because we really focus on creating just an entire environment. And like we wrote a book called The Organic Oasis Guidebook about it's not just about growing vegetables. It's not just about growing flowers or a landscape, but just like how to live someplace that you really want to hang out outdoors. That's good for Mother Earth.
Well, and good for us.
Yes.
And that's, that's a distinction that I think gets lost sometimes in the conversation, that pretty much what's good for us is good for the place where we live and vice versa.
Yes, absolutely.
And as a fellow aficionado of green, being the Green Home Coach on the Green Gab podcast, all in favor.
Yeah. It was like when I was trying to decide, it was a long decision. And I was worried the day I actually posted like images of my new logo, what my listeners would say. But I got a little bit of feedback, but nobody who actually gave me feedback stopped listening. Like, I know that they are.
Well, that's the most important part.
They're still in the Facebook group and they still talk to me about recent episodes. So I know they're still there. So it's all good. And I just think.
What is your Facebook group for our listeners?
What is our Facebook group? I think it's the Green Organic Gardener Pod. So yeah, anyway, let's talk about some great stuff that is going on in 2020, like seeds flying off of shelves and
I know
dirt going out of stores and people wanting to grow gardens. And if you didn't catch the last episode, we were talking about how I started out with a brown thumb before I started my podcast and have turned that around and feel very confident I can, grow a fair amount of food and keep plants alive that I never thought of. And we were going to talk about some of those simple steps that I would take if I didn't have my wonderful husband here, who's the main gardener and does 90% of the work.
You're lucky to have both, right?
Oh, I am so
fortunate.
And we talked about, you laughed when I said, I call myself all the time the green organic eater. Our house, but I'll bet there's lots of people out there who are like that, who like to eat, fresh garden vegetables and, food from the local farmers market.
Yeah.
And have access to a lot of food, but also that's a pretty penny out of their pocket. And as people are, getting thriftier and, wanting to have more access to quality food, I think this is pretty relevant today.
Yes, I could not agree more. And that's why I called you. Just for our listeners, you and I have podcast. Oh my gosh, we've done a couple of shows on each other's podcasts over the last few years. And I really started thinking about what kind of information can I provide to help people during this whole pandemic thing, since we're in the middle of all this. And so many of us, I guess, are kind of homesteading. I use that word loosely, but we're really home-based, probably more so than we've ever been before. And I think we're all looking at our homes with new eyes.
Completely.
Yeah. So this whole idea of backyard gardening and patio gardening and indoor gardening and raising some of our own food, even if it's just a little bit, just really appeals to, I think, so many of us, especially evidenced by what you were saying with seeds just going crazy.
Yeah. And like seed company websites are down and they're like, we'll be back on Monday. We have to restock and make sure we have enough, what we've got. Also feel like I saw a huge resurgence of friends and family posting pictures of homemade cooking meals. Also about like eating around the dinner table again. And so I think that adds a lot. And like in our last episode, we talked about herbs and how to make your, food that you're cooking taste a little more alive and a little fresher. And today we were going to talk about more some of the easy vegetables to grow and some of the things you might want to put in your yard or landscape if you're new to gardening, right?
Let's do it.
So my husband and I wrote last year this book called The Organic Oasis Guidebook. And in there, I have this challenge for like new vegetable gardeners. And so I say, if I had to start over without my husband's help, because we have a pretty big spread now, what I would do is plant one small deep bed, one larger deep bed, and maybe like some kind of fruit. And then I would also plant a cherry tomato in a pot. And the vegetables that I say I would grow lettuce, I would grow carrots, and peas. And the reason I pick these is because so lettuce, carrots, and peas are pretty much ready to go in now. Like we're in Northwest Montana. Not yet now, but I think out of 23 years of gardening, like I have all the records from when Mike and I first got married, the majority of stuff that he put in the ground outside is the second week in April. So from April 7th to April 14th. And that's going to be coming up right before you know it. So if you want to like start building a bed, or even like you could put this in a tub, or we talked in the last show, I said about like he took an old boat that leaked and like filled it full of dirt. And so when you get your beds, like I would say lettuce, so lettuce can go in right away. Carrots, kind of like a warmer soil to germinate, you can put them in, but until you have like 2 full weeks of 70-degree soil, they're probably not going to germinate. So you got to keep wetting them, and you're wondering, when are these seeds ever going to sprout? But you can put them in earlier, but they're just probably not going to germinate. So your soil is that warm.
How do you find your soil temperature? Isn't there a website or something that has that?
I don't know how he knows. Just, I think maybe from like how warm it is outside during the day, and just like lettuce can go in the ground as soon as you can work it. Broccoli, peas, like sugar snap peas, which is the third thing that I say to grow. Now, sugar snap peas have to grow vertically. So they're kind of nice if you have a smaller space to grow. They're kind of nice because they're not going to take a wide place because they're going to grow up. And what I like about these 3 vegetables, so the lettuce, the carrots, and the peas, if you only grow them for like a month, or our peas, I think, are usually ready about the 4th of July. So beginning of April, May, and then by the 4th of July, if you harvest them all, and then you're done, and you're not like slaving away or like tied to a garden all through July and August. Now the carrots are going to need watered, and you're probably not going to harvest them until August, but then you basically just have one crop, whereas the peas you're probably going to eat and they're going to be done. The lettuce, you have a choice. You can either just put the lettuce in and harvest it one harvest, or you can keep picking it. And I like to grow black-seeded Simpson. That's my favorite lettuce. And that's like a lettuce that as long as you keep picking it, it will just keep growing until it bolts. Now, if it gets too hot, it's going to bolt, but it can grow way into July here in Montana. But again, if you get your crop in the 1st of June or Memorial Day, and then you want to be done with it, you don't have to worry about still gardening all through the summer, because come August, a lot of gardeners, they get like super excited and they put all this stuff in and they're like, oh, I'm going to grow squash and I'm going to grow cucumbers and oh, look at these seeds, and oh, these plants are on sale, and oh, I got to get broccoli and cauliflower. And like, I am notorious for coming home in the middle of August and be like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we had homegrown watermelons? Why don't you put these seeds in the ground? And my husband's like looking at me like, even if you could get a watermelon to grow here, you've got to put that seed like in the pot in March or February and like get the plant so that it's ready to go in the ground in July. And you got to BB it because we have a short season. And he just shakes his head and laughs at me because I come home with the most obscure ideas. I'm like, oh, but wouldn't this be so good? Or here, look, I found these seeds, they're on sale. So I bought them. Let's plant them today. Seeds have a certain growing season. So reading your packets.
Right. So you're in Montana. I'm in Oklahoma. So I have a different growing season here.
Yeah. And that's going to make a big difference.
Although it's still in the 50s here. So we're not, super warm yet. I think we've had our last freeze or frost. I wouldn't go so far to say freeze.
No, wait, you have?
We should have. We had one night in late March that was below freezing, but just barely. So that should be our last frost. But we're pretty far south. I haven't been here long enough. I've only been here a little over 3 years. I haven't been here long enough to really learn the growing seasons because we've been kind of out of commission since with a lot of medical stuff going on for the last few years.
But you've got some cool stuff going on in boxes. We're going to talk about my show in a little bit, right? So, but definitely different climates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've had to learn all this again. I think what I started doing, so for instance, we wanted to put down an organic pre-emergent the other day, and I had to go find, it could only go down with a certain temperature of the soil. I'm like, great. So I did find a website. I don't know what it was.
Oh.
But I searched for it online and I found some kind of a website that told us what the temperature was of the soil. So that could be very helpful for when you're planting your vegetables too, I'm guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be like the Old Farmer's Almanac. It wouldn't surprise me if that was the site.
Oh, that's a really great resource.
Or, every state has like an extension service that will have information.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's lots of great things out there.
Well, and we talked on our other episode, we talked a lot about container gardening, which one of the reasons, and I have done more container gardening over the past 7 years than anything else. And I actually had these grow boxes that this certain company sells, but I could grow a lot in a pretty small space, and I could just stick them on my deck or on my patio. Just had to put them where they got enough sun. I do know with where I live now, we have a lot of bunnies. And one of the things I'm having to figure out is if I'm going to do grow boxes, how do I put them up high enough to get them out of the bunnies? Because they like the same I do.
See, and I was thinking that was going to be a good way to keep them because critters has been something that people talk about as one of the big challenges on my show. And pretty much the only answer we ever get is like a physical barrier. You physically got to block them out. And I would think grow boxes would be perfect for that. But I suppose if they were only like a foot off the ground, the bunnies could hop in there.
Well, or just nibble around the edges, because I think mine are about a foot tall. And I've seen some people that have built like something up like a foot or so. And then I've also seen these really cool grow boxes that are waist height so that you don't have to bend over to tend to the garden.
Yeah, well, that's what I like. A nice deep bed. That's like, I like to have one that's at least waist high or two. It's like, so like weeding when you're sitting on the side of a bed is like garden therapy. Weeding when you're down on your knees and it's like never ending and the row is like a mile long, or you have like, you took the month, 3 weeks off in the middle of July to go on vacation and we're like, oh, those weeds aren't so big. And you come back a week and a half later and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't even find a plant. That's not as fun. But sitting on the side of a, like a raised bed or a garden box, I think that's like blissful garden therapy. So
when you said a small, deep bed, is that what you meant?
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Like something that's hip high.
Okay.
Like maybe 2x4, 3x4 feet wide, just not a lot. And then I like to have one that's like 8 foot by 4 foot.
And still raised? So for the larger bed, you like them all raised?
I like raised beds. I mean, there's some things that make plants like broccoli is going to grow pretty tall. Kale is going to grow pretty tall. But I don't know how much of those I would grow if he wasn't here.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. So you've got some options. So if you want to keep it pretty manageable, container gardening is a great way to get going.
Absolutely.
Then you can step into, no pun intended, your small deep beds and or the large deep bed. And then you also mentioned planting some kind of fruit.
Oh, yeah. And like, I would absolutely like our raspberry bushes, like things that are great about fruit, blueberry bushes, apple trees, fruit trees, plum trees, peaches, any kind of tree is that it's going to come back year after year. And, like fruit trees, they might need pruned, and raspberry bushes, you might need to cut them back or do a little weeding. But for the most part, these are things that produce more and more the longer they're in the ground, and they take very little, care. Maybe they need to like our fruit trees, our orchard, we go water really a lot more in August when it's dry around here because we have a pretty dry climate. But for the most part, in the beginning of the season, rain does really good. Raspberries, they don't really need watering because they're usually done by the time it starts to dry out, like the end of July or the beginning of July, even like through June and July, we'll have raspberries, and like we might not have to water them as much. Like we'll get enough rain, it'll be cool enough. And you could just go out there every day and like pick a bowl of raspberries. And like raspberries are so expensive in the store. And it also helps you eat more seasonally, and you can freeze them too. That's another thing I like about cherry tomatoes is you can pick them and just freeze them. You can just cut them in half, throw them in a, like a gallon freezer bag or a quart freezer bag and just throw them. You don't have to cook them first, and they'll be fine to make a tomato sauce out of in the middle of winter.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, same with raspberries, blueberries. A lot of people say or strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, like put them on a tray in your freezer, like a cooking sheet, so they freeze before you put them in the bag.
So they don't clump together.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just amazing how much fruit you can get.
Oh my gosh, I know. So let's take a quick breather. And when we come back, we're going to walk through the steps to get your own backyard garden going and just give you some tips. So hang on. Hey, this is Marla Close, the Green Home Coach, and I am the author of Living Green Effortlessly, Simple Choices for a Better Home. And in this book, besides talking about a bunch of stuff about green and sustainability products and practices you can easily take in your home, I also talk about home maintenance and how important this is to having a home that serves you rather than you serving it. Seasonal home maintenance checklists are a big part of this, and I teamed up with colleague Tina Gleisner from Home Tips for Women to use her maintenance checklist, actually included in the book, starting on page 96. And if you have the book, look them up. But I wanted to give you a brief excerpt from the book to get you excited about why home maintenance checklists, I know that doesn't sound very exciting, but why they are so important. So, maintaining a home is actually a 3-part ongoing process: inspect, maintain, and update. To help you keep track of what you've done and plan to do, make notes on the checklist. First, inspect. If you've only got an hour to spare, pick one exterior side of the house or one room inside to inspect. Note the date you did this on the checklist and flag items needing maintenance or repairs so you can schedule time or make a list for your handyman or handywoman. Second, maintain. Keep your home safe, such as smoke detector batteries. Keep your home energy efficient, like furnace air filters, and prolong the useful life of many home features, like caulking bathroom tile. Write it down when you complete a task, keeps you from guessing later on. And third, update. Take advantage of improved materials and fixtures, upgrade to new building codes, and evaluate when it makes more sense to make an improvement rather than repair, such as replacing a bathroom floor rather than repairing the grout. Check out the book or give me a holler and I'll hook you up online to get the maintenance checklist for yourself. If you'd like to have the entire book, please go to livinggreenbook.com for a multitude of ways to purchase it for yourself. Thanks again. This is Marla, the Green Home Coach. Hey, back on the Green Gab. Jackie, you are just full of so much good information about gardening. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
I think you're like the walking encyclopedia.
Well, I'm getting there. I at least have book knowledge and like knowledge from talking to all my guests. And I've just had amazing guests. And then I live with somebody. I mean, Mike and I have been married 27 years,
Wow.
Going on 28 years this year. And so we've done a lot of gardening and learned a lot. And like now he's got this thing I call the mini farm where he tries to grow as much of our produce. I think I was telling you, I don't know, in the pre-chapter last interview.
How big is that?
It's like a quarter of an acre maybe, or a third of an acre, somewhere in there. I don't really have to go to the produce aisle from August to November.
That's great.
Like, it's amazing how much food comes. And I eat a lot of vegetables. Like, I am a big organic eater. I'm not just a little. And there's things we can't grow.
My family calls me the rabbit.
Yeah, me too. I totally think I was a rabbit in a past life. Like, I could eat salad 3 times a day and just, I love vegetables. Broccoli, give me something like, I have to have something green in every meal, and I'm completely like that.
Okay, so we got a lot of people who are at home a lot more than they've likely ever been right now. And, it's spring, different parts of the country that has different meaning because it's cooler in some parts, warmer in others. So how about lay out just a basic plan for how folks could get started with their own backyard garden this year and what that could look like. And maybe we even give them the easiest way. And then if you want to do a little bit more work, we'll outline that for them.
One thing we didn't talk about is the new big no-till permaculture thing that's sweeping. And this is probably going to be the easiest way. So if you're living somewhere where you have like sod in your backyard and you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine digging up all that sod and doing all that work. Like one of the very first things that people are doing like crazy anymore is laying down cardboard on top of the sod and then importing some kind of compost or manure or really good soil from somewhere, which you're probably going to have to do anywhere. Just like be prepared you cannot invest enough money in your soil. Like it all starts with your soil. So you can go out, like mark off a 4x8 section of sod and lay cardboard over it. And this is something you can do like right now if you're in a place where your ground is still frozen. And then put some good soil on top of that. And in a very short amount of time, like anywhere from 2 weeks to a month or so, a lot of that is going to go away and you'll be able to plant right on top of that sod instead of having to dig it out. And so a lot of the backbreaking work that people, and it's almost better for your soil because you're not destroying the food soil web. Like there's so much information out there. I'm not no-till and don't dig and keep that soil web intact. And then if you put some newspaper maybe under your cardboard and really soak it down, like that's what Mike did because we're in a really dry area around all his apple trees last spring. He laid newspaper down on top of where like all the grass had grown in and then he covered it. And it was amazing. Like our fruit trees, it seemed like they were getting diseased and they were just not really healthy last spring because we just didn't have the water to water them and we had a really dry summer. And he put that down and they just seemed to really come out of it. Their leaves started looking healthier. And so that's something you can do in a yard to start, so define your space. Where are you going to put it? Or if you want to, build an actual bed or you want to use containers, like you can grow, like you were saying, a lot of food in a small space. So the number one thing you need to focus on is like, what are you going to use for dirt? Like get your best source of dirt that you possibly can.
First decision is what you want to plant in. Are you going to do a bed or are you going to do containers or some mixture?
Exactly. Where are you going to put it? Or if you're starting a brand new place where there's sod, there's this new trick where people like layer cardboard and then put dirt over it and you don't have to actually dig out that sod and you can start a new bed from there. Your next thing, so you've either got to figure out, am I going to get seeds or am I going to get starts?
Okay.
And some plants, vegetables and plants are better to start from seed. Some are better to start from starts. And just knowing which ones, like things that can't take a frost, a lot of times it's better to go with starts. Like green beans, they can't take a frost, or tomatoes can't take a frost. So, if you put those seeds in the ground in a place where you have a frost into the end of, they're not going to grow. You're going to want to start from a plant that's, a foot high or something as compared to.
Is it too late for seeds?
Now
in some parts of the country?
No, Mike hasn't started like any of our seeds, like our broccolis or tomato plants or any of that.
What if you start inside?
So he is going to start them soon. Yeah, inside. That's what I'm saying. He hasn't started inside. Some years he starts them in February. It seems kind of late in March, but I think you're okay. Like if you put tomato seeds in dirt today in a pot indoors, I think you'll probably get tomatoes of that by August or September in the fall.
Yeah, I love having to.
Fairly confident.
As much of the summer as I can.
Yeah. So if you're starting from seed indoors, and then if they're like cool weather crops, like we talked a little bit about, like lettuce or peas that you just want to put directly in the ground, probably closer to the beginning of, at least here where we are, the beginning of April. So, but that's coming right up. I mean, it's already March 23rd. By the time this goes out, it'll probably be time to plant in the dirt. Think crops like lettuces and kales, and I love Swiss chards. Another one that I love to grow here in Montana. I eat the stalks like they're celery, and then the leaves instead of spinach, because spinach, it grows really well here if you plant a fall crop and it comes up on its own in the spring. But a lot of times if you put a spring crop of spinach, chances are you're going to get these super hot days in June and it's just going to bolt and you're going to have like a 3-day window to pick it.
Oh.
Whereas it makes a really good fall crop. So, but a lot of experimenting, a lot of doing different things. I did just talk to this woman in Virginia who's written these books called Grow Great Vegetables. And she did write like a different book for Virginia and a different book for Georgia and a different book for North Carolina and South Carolina, I think, because she said timing is essential. And she also said like a zone 7 in Georgia is different than a zone 7 in Virginia. So it is always good to like talk to your neighbors. Like one of the other key things on my show is talk to your neighbors. Talk to somebody who's already gardening organically because they're going to know the best like grass seed even for your lawn. Like a lot of places getting a native fescue, which is a type of grass that has like a longer root, is going to be better than growing Kentucky bluegrass, which is what we have around most of the United States. But that's not always the best grass to grow if you're not in a place where you get the right moisture. So talk to your neighbors and find out what are they growing? When do they put things in? Like I'm sure most people are totally willing to share their garden knowledge if they see that you're interested.
So something else that you have shared with me before is the importance of companion planting so you don't need a lot of chemicals.
Absolutely. That is a huge, huge secret.
Yeah. So what does this mean? And how do we plan for this as we're planning out our backyard gardens?
So I always like to show these pictures I took when we went to the Brooklyn Grange, which is this giant rooftop garden in the middle of Brooklyn, New York. And around the outside of the roof, they have this thing that's like a foot wide and it's a pollinator border and it is full of the prettiest flowers and herbs and smelly, just gorgeous. So they're good for bouquets. They're good for culinary, but they also help reduce the bad pests that come in and are going to eat your vegetables and eat your leaves and eat the things that you don't want. Like they will attract either insects that are going to eat them, or even like a lot of times in the case of aphids, like Patty Armister always says, plant sunflowers because the sunflowers will attract ants that eat the aphids and the aphids will go to the sunflowers and they're more likely to stay off of your plants. So having like a pollinator border out of, just flowers that are friendly, and you can find, there's lists of what flowers are good for beneficial insects. There's a lot of common.
Yeah, they're like most states, right?
And things like dill, calendula, all come back. Another secret that Mike and Patty both talk about is like letting your lettuce seeds go to flower. Don't pull those lettuce plants out right away. If you don't have something to go right back in there, that is a huge key on my show. Don't let your bare soil sit for 24 hours. So another thing, people don't realize you can plant cover crops in a small garden. They think cover crops are only for giant agricultural fields. You can start a cover crop. That's another great way if you want to build your soil. If you're going to like plant tomatoes in June, but you want to dig the bed now while you're home from work in March, you can put a cover crop and that will help put nutrients into your soil. And then you're going to kill that cover crop before it goes to seed. You'll have flowers for your bees. And then you have a great bed full of nutrient-rich soil to put your tomatoes in June when it's time to put them outside.
So what would some cover crops be?
So some good cover crops are things like buckwheat, sweet potatoes is a cover crop, oilseed radishes, clover. Clover is a huge, great cover crop.
That's the one I think we hear of the most. Isn't it like super rich in nitrogen or something?
Yeah. You can put clover seed in with your grass. Like that's something I tell my mom all the time. I'm like, you don't have enough clover in your lawn mix. Like she lives on Long Island in New York and she has all these brown spots. And I'm like, you should have more clover. You need more clover there. It will help all of your lawn.
Maybe we need clover lawns.
We do. They are so good for everything. They build the soil. The insects like them. One thing about insects you always want to make sure is you have like a water source for them. And like insects are little, so they need shallow water sources. And they love moss. Like if you can have somewhere where there's like moss because they can sit in it and will puddle up in the rain, or if you put a sprinkler on, and then they're not going to drown, but they can have a source of water because they're really tiny. So that's another thing that goes good with your pollinator border.
This is the good insects.
Yeah.
That control the health.
So zinnias and snapdragons are annuals that are really good. But like lavender, like another key when I talked to this woman from Rent Mason Bees. So Mason bees are these bees that don't sting. They pollinate like crazy. They'll help your vegetables grow. They'll help your fruit trees grow. They'll help everything grow. But they're like a natural bee. But I lost my total train of thought. Why was I talking about the Mason bees?
Well, we were talking about mixing in companion planting and the importance of cover crops and the importance of pollinator flowers and supporting the beneficial insects. 5 myths of green homes are 5 things that you probably believe about green homes that may be costing you thousands of dollars. Which myth do you hear the most? Get your copy of 5 Myths at greenhomecoach.com and click on the button for 5 Myths of Green Homes. You can also connect with me on Facebook at Green Home Coach and let me know the green home myth you hear the most. I'll also share tips, products, and resources. Be sure to download your copy of 5 Myths of Green Homes now and then check back to learn more. So if you want to do a backyard garden, where you're going to plant it, whether it's going to be container or raised bed, or if you're really brave, down on the ground, figure out how to get your soil into good shape or bring in soil. Plan what you're going to plant and look at companion planting. And you mentioned marigolds were a good companion plant as well.
Yeah, marigolds, nasturtiums.
Marigolds are easy to grow. I like that answer.
Oh, that's what the Mason Bee lady said. She said that one of the things, or maybe it was Andony from Pollination Nation, but one of the problems people have is that they don't have something blooming from April through October, like through your whole garden season. Like you might have flowers that only bloom in June. You might have flowers that only bloom in August. Like you want to have something that's blooming in May, something that's blooming in April, something that's blooming in June, something blooming in July. That was where the Mason Bee thing came from. You always want to have some kind of flower blooming so that your pollinators, and the more pollinators you bring in, the more flowers you're going to bloom. And then your flower is eventually going to turn into your fruit, whether it's your eggplant or your cucumber or your tomato. One thing I always think is interesting. So if you're growing red potatoes, the plants are all green, but the flowers, a red potato is going to have like a pink flower, and like white, golden, Yukons are going to have a white flower. I always think that's fascinating.
Huh. So letting some of your plants go to flower, does that happen after you've harvested? I guess not.
Yeah. If you're harvesting lettuce, you might pull some of the lettuce leaves off and it's going to grow up. And also I was talking at one point about I like the black seeded Simpson lettuce that you're just constantly pulling a leaf off of. But if you're growing a head of lettuce, what do they call it? Like a butterball or something like that, then you're obviously going to harvest.
Yeah. Butterleaf or romaine or something.
Yeah. You're going to harvest the whole plant. But if you're growing black seeded lettuce, seeded Simpson or something, or even if you're growing those butterball lettuces, just let 1 or 2 of them go to seed and you'll find these really pretty flowers. Or radishes like Michael picked, but there's always 1 or 2 that you don't get. Let those grow up and go to seed. And even if you're not saving the seeds, you're amazed at how pretty those flowers are. And you can maybe have one, and it's kind of like a companion plant. It'll bring in those beneficial insects that are eating the pests, or it will just make a smell that the pests don't like.
Cool.
Because horseradish is really just like a giant radish, and I think it has a unique smell.
I gotcha. Okay, so we've got a basic plan for y'all. And the other thing that I thought was really cool, Jackie, that just popped up on my Facebook feed today is on our community Facebook page, there's been an interest in starting a community garden. I think this is going to be a big resurgence for communities. But you had mentioned that, it really could work to our benefit with all the physical distancing that needs to happen in the middle of this pandemic, that we could maybe have plots or have schedules, or you suggested a couple of thoughts.
Well, one of the challenges to having a community garden frequently is not at your home. So you have to have commitment to going to wherever your community garden is. And so, but maybe if people are working together more for social distancing, like somebody will be like, well, I'll water every Monday morning, and I'll water every Thursday morning, and I'll water at 10 o'clock, or I'll help, do this. And also it's just going to create more food, which, is going to be good for us to have more healthy food and accessible food. And there are tons of benefits to community gardens, and, you can learn from your neighbors, especially if you're like one of my listeners, Alan Denko, who moved from Virginia to Minnesota. He talked about when he got to Minnesota, he started volunteering in community gardens because then he could learn. So his growth at his home and his garden was more successful because he was learning from all these other gardeners. You can get a lot of tips that way. A lot of times they'll have a deep bed. Like I know our community garden in Eureka, there's like 20 different deep beds that somebody went in there and built. And then you can put like really good, your good soil in there, or maybe they already have soil in there. And so it's really nice. Again, like I said, that's one of the keys on my show, the best soil you can have. And then also like maybe you'll make friends. You'll be like, well, hey, I'll grow tomatoes this year. Hey, you grow zucchinis this year. Hey, you grow spinach this year.
Yeah.
So you're sharing more. And then like you said, there's so much food you can grow in a small space. Just remember those plants are going to get big. So like just because your squash is tiny, it's going to grow. You like make sure you leave enough room for that plant to grow. Cucumbers are nice because they vine and they tend to go outside the bed, which is nice with cucumbers.
Well, I've got to imagine there's got to be a lot of resources online for planning and building a community garden.
I actually saw this awesome garden planner tool on Instagram yesterday that I signed up for that I've been wanting to share with my audience because she had like a great plan and she has a companion planning route guide. She's like some woman who has like 164,000 followers on Instagram. She was giving away a dehydrator and you had to sign up for her email and you got this garden tool checklist that was pretty neat.
Okay. So if folks want to find that, then we may have to send them to you.
Maybe, and I might have to send it to Insta. I couldn't even find it this morning. Like, where was her website? But we have lots of great information on our website. I should be probably promoting. Like, we have our free organic garden course where I took a lot of what we have learned, like what my guests have said and what Mike has done here and kind of tried to share that. And it has a lot of what I would do if I had to start over without Mike in it.
Yeah. And your website is?
Our website is organicgardenerpodcast.com.
There you go.
Even though our podcast is now called the Green Organic Garden Podcast.
There you go. Lots of people have podcasts named something different in their website, me included. Sue, this has been extremely helpful. I'm like all excited to get going on my own garden because we haven't had really the time to do it for the last few years. So I'm actually looking forward to this and getting out and getting it going.
Well, I'll tell you, my guests will inspire you. They've inspired me. I've spent more time in the garden in the last 5 years than I did in the first 25 combined. So
cool.
I always say, let's get growing.
Perfect. I love it. Jackie, I cannot thank you enough for your time and sharing all of the great information that you have. And everyone out there, check the show notes for the links of all the great things that Jackie has talked about today.
Thanks, Marla. Have a great day, everyone.
Hey, everyone. Have a great green day. That wraps up this episode of the Green Gab podcast. Ready to use what you learned? Get the show notes with all the resources mentioned in this episode. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Thank you again for listening and for leaving a review. And remember that living a little greener is easier than you think.